It all began when the first dispatcher received the call from a ranger station in the eastern Mojave at 6:43 in the morning on April 9th. The voice on the line described a tour van abandoned at the trailhead near Kelso Dunes, with all doors open and personal belongings scattered across the dirt parking area. No sign of the passengers, no note, no explanation. Just the wind moving through emptied water bottles and a single hiking boot lying on its side near the rear wheel. The tour group consisted of 11 adults who had booked a 3-day excursion through a small outdoor recreation company based in Barstow. The itinerary included visits to remote geological formations, overnight camping beneath star fields, and guided sunrise hikes across sections of the Mojave National Preserve that see fewer than 24 visitors per month. The guide was a licensed wilderness instructor with 14 years of experience navigating the region. The clients ranged in age from 28 to 61. None had prior connections to one another before booking the trip. The vehicle was a 15-passenger commercial van registered to the tour operator. It had been parked at the trailhead since the previous evening. Rangers noted that the engine was cold. The keys remained in the ignition. All 11 backpacks were accounted for inside the van. Food supplies had not been touched. No camping gear had been removed. The only item missing was a single digital voice recorder that had been listed on the equipment manifest submitted to the park office 2 days prior to departure. Initial response teams arrived at the scene by 9:15 that morning. They documented the arrangement of belongings and photographed tire tracks leading to the parking area. There were no visible footprints extending beyond the immediate perimeter of the van. The ground was hard-packed caliche soil common to the region, not conducive to retaining clear impressions. Weather records indicated overnight temperatures had dropped to 41 degrees Fahrenheit, with sustained winds reaching 18 miles per hour. Conditions were typical for early April in this section of the Mojave. Search coordinators reviewed the tour operator's filed route plan. The group had been scheduled to camp 3 miles northeast of the trailhead near an unnamed dry wash marked on topographic maps as elevation 2,200 feet. The hike was rated as moderate difficulty with minimal elevation gain. Water caches had been established along the planned route 2 days earlier by the guide. None of those caches showed evidence of disturbance when checked during the initial search sweep. By midday, ground teams had covered a 4-mile radius surrounding the trailhead. They found no clothing, no gear, no tracks, and no indication that 11 people had walked into the surrounding desert. Air support was requested. Helicopter crews scanned the terrain until visibility degraded due to afternoon dust devils forming over exposed playas. The search was suspended at dusk and resumed the following morning with expanded personnel. What troubled investigators from the beginning was not simply the absence of the group, it was the condition of the van. The doors had been left open, exposing the interior to nocturnal wildlife and blowing sand. Personal items including wallets, identification cards, prescription medications, and mobile phones remained inside. One investigator noted in his preliminary report that it appeared as though the passengers had exited the vehicle intending to return within minutes. But they never did. The tour operator was interviewed within hours of the initial report. He stated that the guide, a man named Colin Driscoll, had checked in via satellite phone at 6:30 the previous evening to confirm the group's arrival at the trailhead. Driscoll reported no mechanical issues, no medical concerns among the participants, and favorable weather conditions. He indicated the group would begin the hike at dawn. That was the last communication received from anyone connected to the tour. Investigators retrieved phone records for all 11 passengers. None of the devices had transmitted signals after 7:02 the previous evening, Cell tower data placed the phones within a half-mile radius of the trailhead at that time. After 7:02, all signals ceased simultaneously. Technical analysts confirmed the phones had not been powered down manually. The cessation of transmission suggested either a coordinated removal of batteries, which seemed implausible, or interference of an undetermined nature. Family members of the missing were contacted and interviewed separately. Each provided consistent descriptions of their relatives' travel plans and mental states prior to departure. None reported unusual behavior, financial troubles, relationship conflicts, or indications that the individuals had intended to disappear. Several family members noted that their relatives had expressed enthusiasm about the trip in final phone conversations recorded on the evening before departure. By the third day, the search had expanded to include cadaver dogs, technical rope teams, and geological consultants familiar with the subsurface features of the Mojave. The region is known for abandoned mining shafts, natural fissures, and unstable terrain capable of collapsing without warning. Every identified hazard within a 10-mile radius was inspected. Nothing was found. The case was formally classified as a mass disappearance on April 12th. The lead investigator assigned to the file noted that the absence of physical evidence, combined with the simultaneous loss of contact from all individuals, suggested circumstances that defied conventional explanations. He wrote in his summary that the investigation would require analysis beyond standard search protocols. He was correct. What was discovered 6 days later would shift the entire direction of the inquiry. The eastern Mojave is a landscape defined by absence. Absence of water, absence of shelter, absence of sound. It is a region where distance compresses perception, and isolation becomes a physical sensation registered in the chest. The area surrounding Kelso Dunes is particularly remote. The nearest permanent settlement is 38 miles to the west. The nearest hospital is 64 miles southwest. Cellular coverage is non-existent across most of the preserve. Satellite phones are the only reliable means of communication. The terrain consists of alluvial fans spreading from eroded mountain ranges, broad playas crusted with evaporate minerals, and dune fields rising to heights exceeding 600 feet. Vegetation is sparse. Creosote bushes, brittle bush, and scattered Joshua trees occupy spaces dictated by subterranean moisture. The soil is a mixture of decomposed granite, wind-borne silt, and caliche hardpan that fractures under prolonged sun exposure. Daytime temperatures in early April range from 75 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Nights can drop below freezing in elevated areas. Visibility extends for miles in every direction, uninterrupted by structures or significant vegetation. This apparent openness is deceptive. The landscape conceals countless hazards. Dry washes flood without warning during brief rainstorms. Vertical mine shafts, some dating to the 1890s, remain unmarked and uncharted. Fissures in the earth open along fault lines, invisible to the untrained eye. Navigation requires constant attention to topography and orientation. Even experienced hikers have become disoriented in areas that appear featureless. The trailhead where the van was discovered sits at the terminus of a graded dirt road, accessible only by four-wheel drive vehicles. The road itself extends 14 miles from the nearest paved highway. It passes through corridors of volcanic rock formations and crosses 3 ephemeral stream channels that remain dry except during exceptional rainfall events. Park records indicate that fewer than 12 vehicles travel this road per month during the spring season. Visitors who venture into this area do so with understanding that assistance, if needed, will be delayed by hours or days. These historical records document the region's use by miners, ranchers, and military training operations throughout the 20th century. Abandoned infrastructure remains scattered across the desert. Foundations of collapsed cabins, rusted water tanks, lengths of disconnected pipeline and fragmentary roads leading nowhere. These remnants serve as reminders that human presence here has always been temporary and conditional. The area is also known for unexplained phenomena reported by travelers and researchers over decades. Instances of equipment failure, disorientation in familiar locations, and auditory disturbances have been documented in ranger logs and academic field notes. Most are attributed to environmental factors such as temperature inversions, subsurface geothermal activity, or electromagnetic interference from mineral deposits. Some remain without satisfactory explanation. Kelso dunes themselves are a product of wind patterns channeled through mountain passes over thousands of years. The sand is composed primarily of quartz and feldspar grains, carried from distant riverbeds and deposited in formations that shift incrementally with each storm. The dunes emit a low-frequency sound when disturbed, a phenomenon known as singing sand, caused by the friction of granules sliding against one another under specific moisture and compression conditions. The sound has been described as resembling a distant engine or sustained mechanical hum. It is disorienting to those unfamiliar with the effect. Wildlife in the region is adapted to extremes. Kit foxes, sidewinders, and desert tortoises occupy niches defined by temperature and resource availability. Predatory birds, including golden eagles and red-tailed hawks, patrol thermals rising from heated rock surfaces. At night, the absence of light pollution renders the sky incomprehensibly vast. Stars appear in densities that overwhelm spatial reasoning. The Milky Way becomes a visible structure arcing overhead. First-time visitors report difficulty sleeping beneath such expanses, describing sensations of vertigo and existential unease. Water sources are almost entirely absent from the surface. Springs marked on older maps have dried due to shifts in subterranean aquifers. Seasonal pools form in depressions after rain, but evaporate within days. Any party traveling through this region must carry all necessary water or rely on pre-positioned caches. Dehydration occurs rapidly. Symptoms include confusion, impaired judgment, and difficulty maintaining core body temperature regulation during nighttime cold. The tour group's planned route followed a trajectory northeast from the trailhead toward a geologically significant formation known informally as the Split Ridge, a fractured basalt outcrop dating to volcanic activity approximately 12 million years ago. The ridge is not marked on recreational maps, but appears in geological survey documents filed by university research teams in the 1970s. It is located approximately 4 miles from the trailhead across terrain that offers no shade and minimal landmarks. Investigators walked the planned route multiple times during the search operation. They noted the lack of distinguishing features that would allow precise navigation without GPS equipment. The guide, Colin Driscoll, was known to prefer traditional navigation methods using topographic maps and compass bearings. He had submitted a written route plan to park officials prior to departure, as required by commercial tour permits. That plan indicated the group would establish camp near the base of Split Ridge and return to the trailhead the following morning after sunrise observation. No evidence was found at the intended campsite. The area was undisturbed. No fire rings, no tent impressions, no waste, no gear. Search teams expanded their coverage to include zones adjacent to the planned route, considering the possibility of navigational error or intentional deviation. They found nothing. It was as though the group had evaporated between the trailhead and their destination. One detail noted by multiple search personnel was the silence. The eastern Mojave, particularly in areas distant from roads, produces an auditory environment unlike any other in the continental United States. Wind is intermittent. Wildlife vocalizations are rare during daylight. The absence of mechanical sound creates a void that some describe as oppressive. Searchers reported difficulty concentrating, attributing the sensation to the lack of ambient noise against which the mind typically orients itself. Meteorological data for the night of April 8th showed stable atmospheric conditions with clear skies and light winds. There were no precipitation events, no dust storms, no temperature anomalies. Conditions were ideal for outdoor activity. Nothing in the environmental record suggested a reason for the group to alter their plans or abandon their intended route. Yet, something had occurred, something sufficient to cause 11 people to leave their vehicle with doors open and belongings unsecured, to walk into the desert without their gear, and to vanish without leaving a trace recoverable by trained search teams equipped with advanced detection technology. The landscape offered no answers. It absorbed the questions and returned only silence. On April 15th, 6 days after the initial disappearance, a contract maintenance worker servicing communication equipment at a remote relay station 41 miles northeast of the trailhead discovered an object lodged beneath a junction box mounted to a utility pole. The object was a digital voice recorder, partially buried in wind-blown sand. The recorder was of a type commonly used for field documentation. Its casing showed abrasion consistent with exposure to blowing particulate matter. The device was powered off. The memory card remained intact. The worker submitted the recorder to the regional ranger office as lost property. It was logged into evidence and examined by the investigation team on April 17th. The memory card contained a single audio file recorded on the evening of April 8th, beginning at 7:14 and concluding at 7:41. The file was 27 minutes in duration. It documented the final known moments of the tour group. The recording begins with ambient wind noise and the sound of footsteps on loose gravel. A male voice, later identified as belonging to Colin Driscoll, the guide, can be heard instructing the group to remain close together as they walk toward an unspecified point of interest. He references a geological formation visible in the distance and estimates arrival time at approximately 20 minutes. Participants can be heard conversing in low tones, discussing the landscape and expressing anticipation for the overnight experience. At timestamp 4 minutes 12 seconds, a female voice interrupts the ambient conversation to ask Driscoll about a light visible on the horizon. Driscoll pauses. There is a period of silence lasting 11 seconds. He then states that the light is likely a reflection from a vehicle traveling on a distant road. Another participant counters that there are no roads in that direction according to the map. Driscoll does not respond immediately. The group continues walking. At timestamp 7 minutes 31 seconds, a different male voice observes that the light has changed position. He describes it as moving laterally across the horizon at a speed inconsistent with ground-based vehicles. Driscoll suggests it may be an aircraft. A third voice notes the absence of engine sound. The group stops walking. The recording captures the sound of wind and the faint crunch of boots shifting on gravel. No other sounds are present. At timestamp 9 minutes 55 seconds, Driscoll states that they should return to the van. His tone has changed. The casual instructional quality is absent. He speaks with measured urgency. Several participants ask for clarification. One voices confusion, noting that they have only recently begun the hike. Driscoll repeats the instruction to return to the van immediately. He does not provide a reason. At timestamp 11 minutes 8 seconds, a female voice asks if the light is getting closer. There is no verbal response from Driscoll. The recording captures increased movement, the sound of multiple people turning and beginning to walk rapidly. Breathing becomes audible. Someone asks if they should run. Driscoll says no. He instructs the group to maintain a steady pace and stay together. His voice is calm, but carries an undertone that several audio analysts later described as suppressed alarm. At timestamp 14 minutes 42 seconds, the ambient wind noise diminishes abruptly. Multiple voices react simultaneously, expressing surprise. One participant asks why the wind stopped. Another states that the temperature feels different. A third voice, barely audible, says the word wrong. Driscoll does not speak. The sound of footsteps continues but becomes irregular, as though the group is no longer moving in coordinated rhythm. At timestamp 16 minutes 19 seconds, a male voice shouts for everyone to stop. The footsteps cease. There is a pause lasting 9 seconds. Then a female voice asks, "What is happening to the ground?" The recording captures a low-frequency vibration, rhythmic and mechanical in character. Several audio engineers who analyzed the file compared the sound to subsonic machinery operating at a distance. Geological consultants suggested it could be related to seismic activity, though no tremors were recorded by regional monitoring stations during that time period. At timestamp 18 minutes 33 seconds, a voice states that the light is directly overhead. Driscoll tells the group to move. His instruction is sharp, stripped of any explanatory context. The recording captures the sound of rapid movement, labored breathing, scattered verbal exchanges difficult to distinguish. One phrase is repeated by at least 3 different voices. "We need to go back." At timestamp 20 minutes 11 seconds, the mechanical vibration intensifies. It's accompanied by a high-pitched tone at the threshold of audibility. Multiple participants vocalize distress. Someone asks Driscoll what they should do. He does not answer. The footsteps become chaotic. The microphone captures the sound of something metallic striking a hard surface, possibly the recorder itself being jostled or dropped. At timestamp 22 minutes 48 seconds, a voice screams. It is a single sustained vocalization, not of pain, but of acute fear. The scream is cut off abruptly. Silence follows for 6 seconds. Then the sound of wind returns, louder than before, as though a barrier has been removed. The mechanical vibration is no longer present. The high-pitched tone is gone. At timestamp 23 minutes 14 seconds, a male voice, tentatively identified as Driscoll, says the name Rebecca. There is no response. He repeats the name. Then he calls out additional names: Marcus, Ellen, David. No responses. His voice rises. He shouts the names again. The recording captures only his voice and the wind. At timestamp 25 minutes 6 seconds, Driscoll says he does not understand what happened. He is speaking to himself. His breathing is rapid and shallow. He states that everyone was together. He states that they were right here. He asks where they went. The questions are not directed to anyone. They are vocalizations of incomprehension. At timestamp 26 minutes 31 seconds, Driscoll begins walking. His footsteps are irregular, stumbling. He calls out names continuously. The wind obscures portions of his speech. At one point he says he cannot see the van. He says the trailhead should be visible. He asks why nothing looks familiar. At timestamp 27 minutes 9 seconds, the recording ends. The file terminates abruptly, mid-sentence. Driscoll's final words, partially obscured by wind noise, are analyzed by audio specialists as either "I don't know where" or "I don't know how." The ambiguity could not be resolved through enhancement. The discovery of the voice recorder introduced elements to the investigation that could not be reconciled with known environmental or human factors. The recorder had been found 41 miles from the trailhead, a distance that could not be covered on foot in the time frame between the recording's conclusion and the device's discovery. No explanation was offered for how the recorder traveled that distance. No vehicle tracks, no flight paths, no personnel movements corresponded to its location. Equally troubling was the content of the recording itself. The described phenomena, the moving light, the cessation of wind, the mechanical vibration, did not align with any documented atmospheric, geological, or technological events recorded in the region during that time period. Weather stations reported normal conditions. Seismic monitors detected no activity. Aviation records showed no aircraft within 100 miles of the location. 4. The voices on the recording were verified through comparison with voicemail greetings, video recordings, and audio samples provided by family members. All 11 participants were accounted for at various points in the file. Yet the final segment captured only Driscoll's voice. The others had fallen silent, not gradually, not in a manner suggesting distance or separation. They simply ceased to speak, ceased to produce any detectable sound within the span of seconds. Investigators conducted sound analysis to determine if the recording had been edited or manipulated. Forensic audio experts concluded that the file was continuous and unaltered. The metadata confirmed the recording date and time. The device's internal clock had not been tampered with. The file was authentic. What remained unresolved was the question of what the recording actually documented. Theories ranged from mass hallucination induced by environmental toxins to coordinated hoax to equipment malfunction producing false audio artifacts. None of these theories adequately addressed the fact that 11 people had disappeared, and the only physical evidence recovered was a voice recorder located in a position that defied logical explanation. The investigation entered a new phase, one focused not on where the group had gone, but on what had occurred during those 27 minutes captured in audio. The desert had offered a fragment of documentation. It was incomplete, unsettling, and it raised more questions than it answered. Investigators returned to the trailhead on April 18th with expanded technical resources. Ground-penetrating radar units were deployed to scan subsurface features within a 5-mile radius of the parking area. The objective was to identify concealed voids, abandoned mines, or natural cavities capable of concealing human remains. The scans detected several anomalies, including collapsed mine shafts and fracture zones in bedrock, but none yielded evidence related to the missing individuals. Thermal imaging surveys, conducted via helicopter during nighttime hours, were intended to detect residual heat signatures from potential campsites or remains. The surveys covered over 200 square miles of terrain. No significant thermal anomalies were identified. The region's temperature differential between day and night, combined with the reflective properties of sand and rock, produced scattered false positives, all of which were investigated and dismissed. Cadaver dogs were introduced to the search on April 20th. 3 separate K9 units, each trained in wilderness recovery, were brought to the trailhead and given scent articles belonging to the missing individuals. The dogs showed initial interest in the area immediately surrounding the van, but did not establish a directional track. Handlers noted that the dogs exhibited confusion, circling repeatedly and refusing to commit to a scent trail. This behavior was inconsistent with typical search patterns and suggested either scent dispersion due to wind or absence of a detectable trail. Soil samples were collected from the trailhead, the planned campsite, and locations along the intended route. Laboratory analysis tested for the presence of biological material, accelerants, toxins, and chemical residues. Results were negative across all categories. No blood, no tissue, no synthetic compounds. The soil composition was consistent with undisturbed desert substrate. Digital forensics teams examined the phones recovered from the van. All devices were powered on and fully functional. Battery levels ranged from 38 to 72%. Text messages, emails, and call logs were extracted and analyzed. The final communications sent by group members occurred between 6:51 and 7:02 on the evening of April 8th. The messages were routine in content, notifying family members of safe arrival and expressing excitement about the upcoming hike. None indicated distress or unusual circumstances. Geolocation data from the phones confirmed that all devices were stationary at the trailhead from 7:02 onward. GPS tracking showed no movement. Investigators considered the possibility that the phones had been deliberately left behind, but this did not align with the broader evidence suggesting the group had exited the vehicle intending to return shortly. Satellite phone records from Colin Driscoll's device were subpoenaed from the service provider. The final outgoing call was placed at 6:30, as previously documented, to the tour operator. The call lasted 2 minutes and 18 seconds. The operator's testimony regarding the call's content was consistent. Driscoll reported normal conditions and confirmed plans to begin the hike the following morning. No subsequent calls were made or received. The satellite phone was not recovered. It was not among the belongings in the van, nor was it found during field searches. Interviews were conducted with all personnel who had interacted with the tour group prior to departure. The tour operator, administrative staff, a fuel station attendant in Barstow, and a ranger who had processed the group's permit application were questioned. None reported anything unusual about the group's demeanor, health, or stated intentions. The participants were described as excited, well-prepared, and appropriately equipped for the planned activity. Background investigations into each of the 11 individuals revealed no connections to criminal activity, extremist organizations, or clandestine operations. Financial records showed no unusual transactions prior to disappearance. Social media accounts were reviewed for indications of planning to disappear or communications with unknown parties. Nothing of significance was identified. The individuals appeared to be exactly what their families described: ordinary people participating in a recreational activity. Colin Driscoll's history as a wilderness guide was examined in detail. He held certifications from multiple outdoor education organizations and had led over 300 tours across desert and mountain environments without incident. Colleagues described him as safety-conscious, knowledgeable, and calm under pressure. There was no indication that he had ever acted recklessly or placed clients in danger. His decision to instruct the group to return to the van, as documented in the audio recording, was consistent with his training and responsibility to prioritize participant safety. Investigators consulted meteorologists, geologists, and physicists regarding the phenomena described in the audio file. Meteorologists stated that the cessation of wind, while unusual, could occur due to localized pressure variations or the interaction of downdrafts with terrain features. However, such events are typically brief and would not produce the sustained stillness captured in the recording. Geologists noted that subsonic vibrations can be generated by subsurface fluid movement or tectonic stress, but regional monitoring systems had detected no such activity. Physicists examined the possibility of electromagnetic interference or atmospheric plasma events. The Mojave Desert has been the site of documented ball lightning occurrences and electrostatic phenomena associated with dust storms. However, weather conditions on the night in question were clear and calm, providing no mechanism for such events. The moving light described by participants did not match the characteristics of known natural or human-made light sources. Aviation authorities were contacted to determine if military or civilian aircraft could account for the observations. The region is subject to restricted airspace associated with military testing ranges, but flight logs showed no authorized activity within 50 miles of the trailhead on April 8th. Radar data was reviewed. No airborne objects were detected in the vicinity during the relevant time period. Investigative focus shifted to the voice recorder itself. The device was a commercially available model, widely used by journalists and researchers. It had no specialized features or modifications. The manufacturer confirmed that the unit was part of a batch sold to retailers in California and Nevada during the previous year. There was no method to trace the specific purchase or determine how the device came to be in Driscoll's possession. The location where the recorder was found, beneath a utility pole 41 miles from the trailhead, was revisited multiple times. The pole supported communication equipment servicing a microwave relay station used by regional utilities. Access to the site required travel along an unmaintained jeep trail that intersects with a secondary dirt road 17 miles from the nearest paved highway. The area sees minimal traffic. The maintenance worker who discovered the recorder stated that he visits the site approximately once every 6 weeks. He could not recall seeing the device during his previous visit in late February. Investigators considered whether the recorder had been transported to the location by wind. Meteorological analysis determined that sustained winds of at least 60 miles per hour would be required to move an object of the recorder's weight over a distance of 41 miles. No such winds had occurred in the region since the previous autumn. The recorder's position, partially buried beneath sand at the base of the pole, suggested it had been placed rather than deposited by natural forces. The timeline presented significant problems. The recording ended at 7:41 on April 8th. The recorder was discovered at approximately 10:15 on April 15th. During the intervening period, the device had traveled 41 miles and come to rest in a location with no logical connection to the tour group's planned activities or route. No vehicle belonging to any of the missing individuals was found near the relay station. No footprints, no tire tracks, no physical evidence linked the site to the disappearance. Investigators hypothesized that a third party, unconnected to the tour group, may have encountered the recorder and transported it to the relay station. This theory required the existence of an individual who had been present at or near the location where the group disappeared, who had found the recorder, and who had then traveled to a remote utility site to deposit it beneath a junction box without reporting the discovery to authorities. The hypothesis was logically possible, but unsupported by evidence. Efforts to reconstruct the group's movements based on the audio file were hampered by the lack of visual reference points. Driscoll's descriptions of landmarks were vague and did not correspond to mapped features. The estimated 20-minute walk from the trailhead, mentioned early in the recording, suggested a distance of approximately 1 mile at a moderate pace. However, searchers walking in all directions from the trailhead for distances exceeding 1 mile found no locations matching the environmental conditions described in the audio. Particular attention was given to the mechanical vibration and high-pitched tone documented in the recording. Audio engineers isolated the frequencies and analyzed their characteristics. The vibration registered at approximately 18 Hz, below the range of normal human hearing, but detectable as a physical sensation. The high-pitched tone measured near 17,000 Hz, at the upper limit of auditory perception for most adults. Neither sound matched known geological or biological sources. Comparison with recordings of industrial machinery, aircraft, and electronic equipment yielded no matches. Investigators explored the possibility that the sounds were artifacts of the recording process generated by interference or equipment malfunction. The recorder's manufacturer tested an identical unit under controlled conditions and could not replicate the sounds. Forensic audio specialists concluded that the vibration and tone were present in the environment and captured accurately by the device. The absence of the 10 other individuals in the final segment of the recording remained the most disturbing element. At timestamp 22 minutes 48 seconds, all voices except Driscoll's cease. The transition is instantaneous. No footsteps, no rustling of clothing, no breathing. The recording captures only Driscoll's voice calling out names and the ambient sound of wind. Analysts confirmed that the microphone remained functional and sensitive throughout the recording. The silence was not due to technical failure. It was real. Investigators considered scenarios in which the group could have separated from Driscoll without producing detectable sound. Theories included sudden incapacitation due to toxic gas exposure, coordinated decision to remain silent, or rapid movement away from the recorder at a speed exceeding the microphone's effective range. None of these theories adequately explained the complete and immediate cessation of all sound from 10 individuals simultaneously. On May 2nd, the investigation was formally classified as inactive pending new evidence. The case file remained open, but field operations were suspended. Investigators had exhausted available resources and methodologies without producing actionable leads. The disappearance of 11 people, the recovery of a voice recorder in an inexplicable location, and the content of the audio file constituted a body of evidence that resisted conventional interpretation. Families of the missing were notified. They were provided access to copies of the audio recording, though several declined to listen. The emotional toll of the investigation had been severe. Many family members expressed frustration with the lack of answers and the abundance of questions that seemed to have no resolution. The investigation had produced data, documentation, and analysis. It had not produced understanding. The desert, indifferent to the efforts of those searching it, retained its secrets. The case became another file archived in regional offices, another name on a list of unresolved incidents that accumulate slowly in jurisdictions where wilderness exceeds human capacity for surveillance and control. Multiple theories emerged in the months following the suspension of active investigation. Each attempted to reconcile the known facts with plausible explanations. None achieved consensus among investigators, analysts, or family members. The disorientation hypothesis suggested that the group experienced collective spatial confusion induced by environmental factors. Proponents noted that the Mojave Desert can produce optical illusions due to atmospheric refraction and temperature inversions. Mirages are common. Perception of distance and scale becomes unreliable. The theory proposed that Driscoll and the participants became disoriented, walked in directions they believed would return them to the trailhead, and instead moved deeper into uninhabited territory where they succumbed to exposure. This theory accounted for the group's failure to return, but did not explain the audio recording's content. The described phenomena, the moving light, the mechanical vibration, the cessation of wind, were not characteristic of environmental disorientation. Additionally, Driscoll's experience and training made it unlikely he would lead a group into lethal danger due to navigational error. The theory also failed to address the recorder's location 41 miles from the trailhead. The abduction hypothesis proposed that the group encountered individuals with hostile intent. The remote location, the absence of witnesses, and the vulnerability of the group during nighttime hours made them potential targets for violence. Proponents suggested that the participants were forcibly removed from the area, transported to an undisclosed location, and killed. The recorder was discarded or planted as misdirection. This theory required the presence of multiple abductors capable of subduing 11 people without leaving physical evidence. No tire tracks from additional vehicles were found at the trailhead. No forensic indicators of struggle were detected. The audio recording did not capture voices or sounds consistent with human attackers. The theory also necessitated a motive, which investigators could not identify. None of the missing individuals had known enemies, debts, or circumstances that would provoke targeted violence. The voluntary disappearance hypothesis suggested that the group, or a portion of it, planned to vanish and assumed new identities. This theory was based on rare historical precedents in which individuals have orchestrated elaborate disappearances to escape personal circumstances. Proponents noted that the group could have prearranged transportation from a secondary location, abandoned the van as misdirection, and dispersed. This theory failed to account for the diversity of the participants, who had no prior connections and no apparent shared motive. It also did not explain the audio recording, which documented genuine confusion and fear rather than coordinated deception. Financial records and subsequent monitoring of social security numbers, bank accounts, and identification usage showed no activity linked to any of the 11 individuals following their disappearance. The equipment malfunction hypothesis proposed that the voice recorder captured sounds generated by internal errors or environmental interference rather than actual events. The mechanical vibration and high-pitched tone were artifacts of electromagnetic fields interacting with the device's circuitry. The participants' reactions were misinterpretations of mundane stimuli amplified by darkness and isolation. Forensic analysis of the recorder contradicted this theory. Testing confirmed that the device functioned normally and accurately captured environmental sound. The vibration and tone were present in the acoustic environment, not products of malfunction. Additionally, this theory did not address the group's physical disappearance, which remained unexplained regardless of the recording's content. The psychological event hypothesis suggested that the group experienced a shared acute stress reaction triggered by perceived threat, real or imagined. Collective panic is a documented psychological phenomenon in which groups respond to fear stimuli in synchronized, often irrational ways. Proponents of this theory argued that the participants fled the area in a state of terror, became separated, and died from exposure before search teams could locate them. This theory accounted for the urgent tone in Driscoll's instructions and the evident distress in participants' voices. However, it required the group to move rapidly enough to outpace subsequent searches, and to do so without leaving tracks, discarded clothing, or remains within the search perimeter. The immediate cessation of voices captured in the recording was also inconsistent with gradual panic-induced dispersal. The subsurface collapse hypothesis proposed that the group fell into an unmarked sinkhole, abandoned mine shaft, or natural fissure. The Mojave contains countless such features, many unmapped and concealed by sand or vegetation. Proponents suggested that the mechanical vibration documented in the recording was subsurface structural failure preceding collapse. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted during the investigation were designed to detect such features. While several voids were identified and inspected, none contained evidence of the missing group. The theory also did not explain the recorder's recovery location or the phenomena described by participants prior to the alleged collapse. The atmospheric anomaly hypothesis suggested that the group encountered a rare meteorological event such as a dust devil, microwave, or localized pressure wave. Such events can produce disorientation, auditory phenomena, and rapid changes in environmental conditions. Proponents argued that the group was scattered by the event and subsequently unable to regroup or navigate back to the trailhead. Meteorological records showed stable atmospheric conditions on the night in question. No weather stations within 100 miles recorded anomalies. The hypothesis required an event so localized and brief that it escaped detection by monitoring equipment, yet powerful enough to disperse 11 people beyond the reach of organized searches. The theory did not address the recorder's final location. The technological interference hypothesis proposed that the group was exposed to electromagnetic radiation or directed energy from classified military or research operations. The Mojave Desert has a history of weapons testing and experimental technology trials. Proponents suggested that the group inadvertently entered a restricted zone and was affected by equipment operating in that area. Investigators contacted military liaisons and reviewed airspace restrictions. No operations were scheduled or conducted in the region during the relevant time period. The nearest active testing range was over 70 miles distant. The hypothesis lacked evidentiary support and was dismissed by officials as speculative. The unknown natural phenomenon hypothesis acknowledged the limits of current scientific understanding and proposed that the group encountered an event or condition not yet documented by researchers. The Mojave Desert, despite extensive study, remains incompletely understood. Subsurface geothermal activity, mineral formations with unusual electromagnetic properties, and biological processes in extreme environments continue to produce unexpected observations. This theory, while intellectually honest, offered no mechanism or prediction. It functioned as an acknowledgement of ignorance rather than an explanation. Investigators noted its validity as a placeholder, but emphasized that it provided no actionable direction for further inquiry. Each theory, when subjected to scrutiny, revealed gaps that could not be bridged with available evidence. The case resisted reduction to a single narrative. The facts, the abandoned van, the audio recording, the absence of 11 people, the inexplicable location of the recovered device formed a constellation that defied coherent interpretation. What remained undisputed was that something occurred in the eastern Mojave on the night of April 8th that removed 11 individuals from the observable world and left behind only a fragment of documentation that raised questions no witness could answer. The investigation had produced theories. It had not produced conclusions. The case remains archived under the designation EM 1248, a reference to the region and the date of initial report. The file occupies 3 storage boxes in a records facility maintained by the National Park Service. It contains investigative reports, audio files, photographs, interview transcripts, forensic analyses, and correspondence with family members. Periodic reviews are conducted to assess whether emerging technologies or methodologies might yield new insights. To date, no such developments have occurred. Family members of the missing continue to seek answers. Several have organized independent search efforts, hiring private investigators and consulting specialists in missing persons cases. These efforts have not produced recoveries or substantive leads. Some families have pursued legal actions to have death certificates issued, a process requiring declarations of presumed death in the absence of remains. Others resist such measures, maintaining hope that explanations will eventually surface. The voice recorder remains in evidence storage. Requests to re-examine the device using advanced audio forensic techniques have been submitted by academic researchers and independent analysts. Permissions have been granted in limited cases, but results have not altered the fundamental conclusions drawn during the original investigation. The recording is authentic. The events it documents remain unexplained. The trailhead where the van was discovered has seen minimal visitation since the incident. Park officials erected a small informational marker acknowledging the disappearance and advising visitors to register their travel plans and carry adequate communication equipment. The marker does not provide details of the case. It serves as a reminder that the desert, despite its apparent emptiness, is capable of outcomes that defy anticipation. Speculation about the case persists in online forums, true crime communities, and academic circles focused on unexplained disappearances. Theories range from the plausible to the fantastical. Some assert that the group was abducted by non-human entities. Others suggest covert government involvement. Most acknowledge that the available evidence supports no definitive conclusion. The case has become a reference point in discussions about the limits of investigative capability and the persistence of mystery in an era of surveillance and data saturation. Investigators who worked the case, when interviewed in subsequent years, describe a sense of incompletion that remains unresolved. One retired lead investigator stated in a media interview, that he had worked hundreds of cases involving missing persons and had become accustomed to uncertainty. But the Mojave tour group case, he said, was different. It was not merely unsolved, it was incoherent. The evidence did not form a pattern that could be interpreted. It was, he said, as though the rules governing cause and effect had been suspended for a duration of 27 minutes, and the result was a void where 11 people should be. The Mojave Desert continues to draw visitors, researchers, and those seeking solitude in landscapes unaltered by human presence. The region's remoteness and environmental extremes make it a destination for individuals comfortable with risk and isolation. Park officials emphasize preparedness and communication. They advise travelers to inform others of their plans, to carry redundant navigation and communication systems, and to recognize that assistance, if needed, may be hours or days away. The case has influenced policy changes regarding commercial tour operations in remote areas. Permit requirements now include mandatory GPS tracking for guides, scheduled check-ins via satellite communication at intervals no greater than 12 hours, and enhanced insurance coverage for participants. These measures are intended to prevent future incidents or to facilitate rapid response when emergencies occur. Whether they would have altered the outcome for the tour group that disappeared on April 8th is unknowable. 11 people entered the eastern Mojave, expecting to experience solitude, natural beauty, and a temporary separation from the routines of daily life. They achieved a separation more complete and permanent than any could have anticipated. Their names are recorded in missing persons databases. Their faces appear on websites maintained by families and advocacy organizations. Their disappearance is documented in official files and discussed in contexts ranging from investigative journalism to speculative fiction. But they remain absent. The desert, which received them, has not returned them. The landscape, indifferent to human presence and human absence alike, continues to exist as it has for millennia, shaped by wind, heat, and the passage of time measured in geological rather than human scales. The voice recorder, a small device containing 27 minutes of audio, remains the only tangible link between the missing and the world they left behind. It is a fragment, incomplete and troubling, offering neither resolution nor comfort. It documents a transition from the known to the unknown, from presence to absence, from voices calling out in confusion to silence that has not been broken. Some stories were never meant to be uncovered. Welcome to Canadian Mystery Archives. Here, we don't soften the truth and we don't skip the details. We investigate forgotten files, unresolved disappearances, and unexplained incidents from across United States, cases quietly shelved, communities that faded from records, and events that left more questions than answers. In this channel, nothing is sensationalized. Every fragment, every silence, and every unanswered detail is examined with the seriousness these cases deserved, but never received. If you value cold, atmospheric, investigative documentaries rooted in geography, isolation, and uncertainty, you're in the right place. Subscribe, stay close, and step with us into the files that were never fully closed.